we can just bring both of you up. But I know, Mob, you got here first. So, Mob, can I get your age for TikTok purposes?
I'm 29.
Awesome. Sorry. It feels so weird to be the one asking that question. Normally, I'm just hanging out in the room. I don't have to do that work. So
better safe than sorry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Always.
Thank you for coming up.
I'll be quick. I just have a couple questions. Okay. I've watched a lot of your stuff on Myth Vision. I don't remember if you've addressed, and with you, Dr. Kip, but okay, I have, there's if a slave runs away, you're not supposed to return them. Like, why would this be true if they are, in fact, property? Like, if an ox runs away, they'd have to return it, right? So, yeah. What would you say to that apologetic?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's sort of what I was trying to get at a little bit earlier. To sort of give the balanced view here, or the balanced approach to this text, we don't have anything confirmed in the other ancient Near Eastern law collections that's specifically like this. Now, we do have lots of runaway slave laws in the A&E law collections. We do have a fragmentary law in, and I see other people joining. I don't know how many more people I'm going to take, just because I taught Sumerian tonight, and I've got to get to bed because I was up pretty late last night, and I just wanted to run this stream for a little bit to do. But we'll try anyway. Sorry, just in case you're in the box and I don't get to you, I'm sorry. It's not intentional. What was I saying? Yes. So, we have in Laws of Hammurabi 87, which is a fragmentary bit, that it seems like we have a law about a slave being struck in some way, and the end result of the law is that they're not to be returned to their master. Now, I think it's interesting to point out, I pointed out in the book, and talk about the people that have engaged with that, and I talk about how the Akkadian gets translated. But really, given the fact that it's fragmentary, it's not something that you could. It's not a law I think I'd want to put a lot of weight on, just because we don't know exactly what it's saying. With that being said, it does seem like this is an anomaly. If it certainly would be an anomaly if, in fact, it is about any runaway slave. The problem is, and again, I think a really good resource to look at, besides the section of my book on it, is Samuel Gringus in his book on...
Obviously the best resource.
Obviously. But I think that the way that Deuteronomy is structured and what its goals are, and also in line with that is the wording of the law itself. So that one of the things that really stands out about Deuteronomy 23:15-16 is that the text says, you are to not return him to his master, you to let him live in where he sees fit in one of your gates. Right? And as Atheistic Preacher was mentioning when he was up here, is that language seems really strange if this is an Israelite, right? If it has the potential to be an Israelite that runs away. Because the law wouldn't say, let the slave live within your gates wherever he chooses, right? He would just go back to his landed property. He'd go back to his allotted portion. So that's one of the things that sort of, if you read Raymond Westbrook on this, or, other specialists, I think Bruce Wells talks about this as well. It's just language that it stands out as odd if this is an Israelite. And if that's the case, it does leave open the possibility that it's a foreigner from inside of the land who's escaping a master. But then you'd have to ask the question, why would a foreigner be allowed, why would this be extended to a foreigner but not extended to an Israelite, which, throughout the law collections, Israelites fare better than what you see see for foreigners. And it makes sense given their position in the text and how they view their position in the text. So this is why most scholars say this is about, there are stipulations, and Sam Gringus has lots of examples of these that he shows in his book. But you have treaty or you have treaty parity treaties, or vassal treaties. You have these treaties that are signed between nations in the ancient Near East, and one of the clauses that you often see is an extradition clause. So if our slaves escape to you, you return them. If they escape to us, we return them to you. But the thought is that this is a law where they're not to have that type of parity treaty with another nation. It shows this position of weakness, or at least equality with the other nation they'd be having that treaty with. And so because Israel is supposed to be the head and not the tail, and yet they also don't want to seem to be guilty of harboring runaway slaves, because that's something that throughout the ancient Near East is a big no-no. Right?
Can I ask?
Please.
You're saying it would look. You're saying, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. You're saying it would look weak to give back to return them?
Yeah, that's right. Because in those treaties, it's like if you make a treaty with me and you're the suzerain and I'm the vassal, you're like, hey, if my slaves run away to you, or if I have like people that are trying to get out of military duty or something, and you catch them, you got to give them back to me. Right? You can't just keep them in your land. You got to give them back to me. So it's an obligation that's on the vassal. And so what it seems like is happening here in Deuteronomy is that they're just not supposed to have these types of treaties with the nations around. If they're going to have a treaty like you see in Deuteronomy 20, it's vassalage. Best case scenario, that other nation becomes a vassal. That other city becomes a vassal to them. So I guess it's a little complicated. You kind of wade through the Hebrew a little bit and see why it is that scholars make that argument. But yeah, that's where most of them sort of come down on that.
Awesome. That was a very good response. Thank you.
Oh, of course.
Wait, did you say earlier other ancient or nearby places have a rule where if you strike a slave, they go free?
No, it's, well, sort of. So we have Laws of Hammurabi 117, which is very similar to what we see in Exodus 21, 20 to 21. So you have a pledge. Sorry, it's 115 and 116, not 117. But you have a pledge if they're in the house of the creditor, and the creditor, they die of natural causes, or so they unalive of natural causes. Sorry, TikTok. Then there is to be no penalty, because ostensibly they've determined that it's from natural causes. So it's just the way of life. However, if they unalive because of mistreatment, then there's lex talionis applies, and if the pledge was the son of the debtor, then the son of the creditor gets unalived. So it's very similar to what we see in Exodus 21, 20 to 21. But there is the law. I'll just read it if I can pull it up very quickly. Sorry, it sucks when you have one bad eye. Physical treatment, there it is. Oh, come on. Damn it, Josh. Sorry, it'll just take me a second. Here we go. It's only partially preserved. Yeah, and of course I don't have the translation there. Where is it, Josh? But yeah, I'll just read you my note on it real quick. Laws of Hammurabi 87 is only partially preserved, although we can make out much of what it says. The text seems to describe a slave that runs away from his master and is to be returned to him. However, in a broken section, it appears that the slave is not to be returned to his master if there is some sort of beating involved. So And if I can just, I thought I would have it like right there. And of course, I don't see it. Why wouldn't it be under? You know what? I will just do it on the next live, so I don't bore everybody sitting here looking for a particular.
No, that's really interesting to see how these laws compare to like similar civilizations. It's not like that different. Like whenever I talk to these apologists, they always make it sound like it's so much better. I do have. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I do have a couple. I don't know how much time you have. I do have a couple more questions.
I got a couple minutes. I was going to say, yeah, one of the things that Kip and I try to do, and I try to do them in the books that I write, is to do that comparative analysis. So like in the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, Volume 2, I have a chapter on grape and adultery laws, and I just pull up all of the laws from the ancient Near Eastern law collections about those two things and categorize them, based on their emet categories, and then do the same in the Hebrew Bible and then compare those data sets. And what you end up seeing, and I do the same thing with the chapter 5 of the book, is just all comparative, looking at all the overlapping laws that talk about comparable things and just making comparisons between them. And what you end up seeing is that sometimes the Hebrew Bible law collections are a little bit better, sometimes they're a little bit worse by our lights, right? By our ethical standards. But on the whole, it's kind of a wash, right? They're on par. It's what you would expect to find in an ancient Near Eastern law collection. So,
right, yeah, that's super interesting. Okay.
And as we all know, I famously have written no books.
You're so funny.
Have you though? Have you not though, Kip?
I mean, that's what I hear.
I know a guy. Just saying.
But Mob, if you go ahead, if you got another question, I got it in a minute. Go ahead.
Sure. I have an idea. There's 3 of them. I can read all 3, and then you like pick the one that sounds most interesting.
Okay.
Okay. So one is about the New Testament. Paul
You can
lists.
skip that one because
You've come to the right place.
I will have no expertise in it. Sorry.
So we're talking about the runaway slaves. Another one is if kidnapping is illegal, how did they get slaves? Since any form of taking people non-consensually is kidnapping.
Yeah.
And the second one is, like, I don't speak Hebrew. I use Bible Hub, so this might be wrong. But in Leviticus 25, verse 40, it talks about, like, hired servants. Mm-hmm. It uses a different word than it does in verse 44, or slave. It uses that same word in Exodus 21, I noticed. So isn't that evidence it's the similar kind of slavery? It's not like a debt work, or no? So those are the 2 questions.
Yeah. So I think we can do both pretty well here. And Kip, if I'm talking too much, man, just jump in here.
It's your live, dude.
No, I know, but you're my guest. So, yeah, I mean, certainly you're not allowed to kidnap people. Like in the ancient Near East, you're not allowed to kidnap people. We have other law collections that have laws against this. The penalties can vary a little bit. In Laws of Hammurabi 14, I think, the penalty is unalivement. So it's not. It's what we would expect to see.
You can buy people, though.
Yes, you can buy them. So the question
you can capture them in war.
So this is where we've got to be really careful. Not you, Mob, but like all of us, on when we have these discussions, to make sure that when we use words, we're using them based on their understanding. So, for example, one that's very, very common is. And I had somebody ask it me recently, well, isn't slavery oppression? And I say, well, yes, of course, it's oppression. And they say, well, the Bible is very clear that you can't oppress people, right? So how could you have slavery if you can't oppress people? And it's a great question. The problem is that the words that are used in Hebrew for oppression, like ashak, like these have a slightly different like connotation than we have for them. Right, so we would look at slavery and say slavery in all forms is oppression, because you're taking away somebody's bodily autonomy. That's oppression. However, they did not see it that way. Right, there were lots of situations where they thought that somebody could be reduced to the status of slave, and that's not oppression. So we can't make that connection for them just because we make it for us, if that makes sense. So in that same light, we would think, going to war and taking captives would be kidnapping, right? That's what we would think that is. And certainly what's described in Deuteronomy 21:10-14, where you have the captive bride, that sure seems like kidnapping to me. Right, but that's by our lights. That's by our view of what that word means, to steal someone. And but they did not see it that way. So, like taking people captive in war, not stealing. Going over to a foreign slave sale and purchasing a slave, not stealing. Right? We can't read into like the 10 Commandments, like don't covet, don't steal. We can't just say because we would say that's stealing that they would have said. One would have to show that they would have thought purchasing a slave or reducing someone to slavery through debt, and having that debt or pledge converted to chattel slavery would have been stealing.
What was the second context you gave? The first one is captives of war, and then you said,
oh, like a debt slave or a pledge. So one of the things that happened very regularly in the ancient world is that, let's say I took out a loan from you. I could take someone in my family as a form of like type of collateral, and they could serve in your house as a pledge. Call that a pledge. Now, what that means is if in the end I default on the loan and it's clear that I can't pay it back, one of the things that you can do as the creditor is, and often I have to agree, the law stipulates that I have to agree to this, but you can convert that pledge into a full chattel slave and take the value of that pledge and apply it to the debt to recoup your losses and to help pay off the debt for me. And again, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm just wondering if this is like Exodus 21:7, I think, when he's like selling the daughter. Is that an example?
Yeah. Well, well, that wouldn't be a pledge. That would be. Well, I mean, it would be akin to that, right? It's you're saying I will essentially sell, right, my daughter to pay off that debt. So yes, but it's different from the pledge in that there's it's not that there's no loan. It's just sorry, I don't want to get bogged down in detail here. One of the things that's really also important for us to recognize is that there's sort of gradations to these different statuses that people can take.
Right.
And so that's it makes it a little bit more tricky. Oh, Captain Dadpool, sorry. I got a notification saying there was something about your content or something. I don't know what that means exactly.
I got that notification too for a minute early on. It was weird.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but
maybe he had like something on his video, like a cigarette or something. I don't know, something like that. He talks very sensitive.
I see.
Mm.
Well,
yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so that's very interesting. Their idea of kidnapping is very different. So, like, if a foreign nation stole slaves from someone else and then they were selling them, they could go and buy those, and that's fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the text in Exodus 25 is. I don't think they have that sort of situation in mind. If there's a lot of discussion about what these laws actually were, and if you leave the fundamentalist evangelical position behind, then you can entertain, that question, like, what were these laws actually doing? So because then you're not sort of beholden to a deity came down on Mount Sinai and said, here are the laws. So that you have to then ask the question, what is it that the writer has in mind when they're so? But if we're stepping into that internal critique, into that position, and saying, okay, if this is, it's sort of like the Numbers 5 discussion. If this is actually something that took place, if that's your position, that you hold that Numbers 5 was something that this abortifacient would actually be made from the dust and the curse, then you sort of have to walk down what necessarily follows, that X might happen if there is, that X would happen if there is if there's a pregnancy. But I don't think that in the context of that passage that the writer or the editor actually has that situation necessarily at the front of his mind. And in the same way, I don't think that the writer of Leviticus 25, 44 to 46 is thinking to himself, all right, now what happens if these slaves have been illegally obtained in foreign nations? I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's just assumed they're going to be in a slave sale over there, and the assumption, is in his mind is just that they're going to be legally procured by the Israelites. That's all.
Right.
There's probably not a strong emphasis. It's more of a don't ask, don't tell sort of a culture, I think, when it comes to things like this, like your slave markets. I think the benefit of the doubt would probably have tended to be given to the sellers and those operating them.
Yeah,
and there's just in situations like that too, where in this world where documentation was at a minimum, it's this sort of thing where I think it's very likely that people who were even by the laws of the places in which they lived were probably unjustly enslaved and sold, and in situations like that.
But interestingly enough, even and again, those things are definitely true. I'll just read a couple. Like, we have laws concerning
slave laws, like slave market laws. Those are interesting.
Like in the Code of Hammurabi.
Yeah. If a man, so here's laws of Hammurabi 280. If a man should purchase another man's slave or slave woman in a foreign country, and while he is traveling about within his own country, that is in Babylonia, the owner of the slave or slave woman identifies his slave or slave woman. If they, the slave or slave woman, are natives of the country, their release shall be secured without any payment. So, the point here is that a guy goes out to a foreign country, purchases, a slave, and then brings them back into Babylonia. And while they're like walking around, another Babylonian says, "Hey, that's my slave." So either that slave had been kidnapped or that slave had run away, right? So then that the law is dealing with what to do in that situation. 281 says, if they are natives of another country, so if the slaves are natives of another country, the buyer shall declare before the god the amount of silver that he weighed. So the guy that went to the foreign country and bought them, he's saying, hey, I swear I actually did pay money, for these, and here's the amount that I paid. And the owner of the slave or slave woman, that is the rightful owner, shall give to the merchant, the guy that bought the slave in the foreign country, the amount of silver that he paid, and thus he shall redeem his slave or slave woman. So the law does consider that situation, and that's not the only one. It's just the one that came to mind first. But yeah, these are situations that they consider, which is why, if in fact something like Deuteronomy 23, 15 to 16 is just about any slave running away, it stands out as such an anomaly that it would, like, in effect, if applied, overturn like the entire slave, like the point of the whole slave system, right? And it seems like it's a weird thing to have be the case on the heels, not directly on the heels, of course, but like what's 8 chapters later, after the developed debt slave laws in Deuteronomy 15. So,
Yeah, very very interesting stuff. Yeah, that's all I had. That's all my questions.
Awesome. Well, I
So
appreciate
thanks
it.
so much, guys, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, of course. I'm so sorry, people in the guest box. I promise I will try to do more of these. But I've gotta end this. So sorry. Definitely nothing personal. But I've gotta end this and get downstairs and spend a little time with Megan. But thank you all. There's almost 100 people watching. I can't thank you all enough. This has been a really fun 3 days.
So is that the number up in the right top right hand corner? Is the number of people watching?
I think
Or it
so.
says
99 right now.
Oh, cool.
And you guys have tapped the screen 59,000 times. That's crazy. Thank you. 60,000. I